All right, here we go. Here to talk some Chicago Bulls offseason. I'm Jason Pat from for Blog a Bull, talking with Ricky O'Donnell. And offseason starts tomorrow night, Friday morning, whatever the heck you want to call it, 11:01 Central Time in Chicago. And we're here to, like I said, we're here to talk Bulls offseason. We'll first, before actually diving into free agency and stuff like that, figured we'd go back, talk briefly about the Derrick Rose trade and about the Bulls picking Denzel Valentine, and maybe talk about just the Jimmy Butler rumors for a second. So we'll start with Derrick Rose. How surprised were you that the Bulls actually pulled that off? Were you happy that they did it? Did you think it was time for him to go? I was very surprised that they did it. I thought the return was fine, and I do think it was time to move on.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would have loved to have seen contract year D Rose because I think that he could potentially have had a very good season. I think he could potentially have a very good season in New York too, especially if they're playing Porzingis at the 5, Melo at the 4, and they can get 2 more shooters on the wings. I wouldn't put it past D Rose to have a bounce back year because I think we've seen the last couple of years that, like, when he wants to play hard, he can still be, super explosive in the open court. And I don't think his speed has diminished that much. No. What really has diminished is the fact that he can't draw fouls anymore. He's never been a good shooter. So when you combine those two, you just don't have a recipe for efficient offense. Obviously, I love D-Rose. I said my piece on D-Rose already.
It was great stuff. If you didn't, go read it at Bloggable. There's a really great piece Ricky wrote just about what Derrick Rose means to the Bulls, what he meant to the Bulls, what he means to the city of Chicago. Great stuff.
Thanks. And so, I mean, it's tough to get over that. But the more I think about it, the more I think that, it would have been tough for the Bulls to get a better return than this. They needed a defensive anchor, and I think Robin Lopez can definitely be that. I saw a stat that when Lopez was on the floor, the Knicks were essentially a top 10 defense. So that's pretty solid. And Jerry Grant, I was pretty high on him coming into the draft a year ago. I know he had an up and down rookie year, but look at his numbers in April. And when he actually got some playing time in April, he played 30 minutes a game. He averaged 14.5 points a game, 49% shooting from the field, 37% shooting from 3, almost 4 assists a game, 4 rebounds. So Grant, to me, they're going to need to figure out if they think he's a 1 or a 2. Do they think he's ultimately a third guard who can kind of come off the bench, be a combo guard? I don't really know what his role is going to be, but he's the big piece in this in a sense because while Lopez is a nice stopgap, I think Grant is really the guy who you're going to kind of want to build around. And I've been more critical on the Bulls front office than anyone. I wrote something in the middle of the season that was basically lit him on fire. It said the Bulls are a complete failure or whatever. I forget what the headline is. But
I remember that.
Very controversial at the time. But I do think that, now you look at the roster and they have kind of quickly assembled some decent young pieces in Denzel Valentine, in Jerry Grant, in Spencer Dinwiddie, and Cristiano Felicio, Bobby Portis, and Nikola Mirotic, as well as Doug McDermott. I mean, what is that, 6-7 guys right there that they've acquired in the last year who, they've been able to turn over the roster, which is a tough thing to do. And what it reminds me of, and then I'll turn it over to you in a second, people have, made the Hoiberg is Trestman comparison, right? We all sort of rolled our eyes at that initially, and now maybe like, hey, maybe it's true. Maybe he is Trestman. But why did Mark Trestman fail? So to me, he failed in large part because Lovie Smith had a lot of success with a core that just got old. And then the Bears had to, reboot the whole thing. If Mark Trestman would have had prime Brian Urlacher, Lance Briggs, Adewale Ogunleye, Tommy Harris.
Oh, man, bringing me back.
Reuben Brown, John Tate, Thomas Jones. Like, the Bears were good then because they had a lot of dudes in the prime of their career who all reached their peak at the same time, right? Then they got old, and sports are a young man's game, so you fall out, and then you got to build it back up. So Thibodeau was a great coach, but he was in part successful because Noah, Rose, Dang, those dudes were all in the prime of their careers. Butler, you can go down the list. So now the Bulls need to find this next generation. It's not an easy thing to do. People are so impatient. People want this to be done ASAP. That's not the case. You got to find the young guys. You got to build the young guys up, and you all have to hope they can reach their peak around the same time. So it's a very tough thing the Bulls are trying to pull off. I get why people don't like Gar Forman. I don't like Gar Forman, but in a sense, like, what more do you want him to do? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I just kind of see that, and I do give them credit for at least actually having the. What am I trying to say that they actually were proactive on trading? Like just looking at the Rose thing, they were not. It is baffling that they did not trade Pau Gasol at the deadline. That was a ridiculous move. So at least they kind of learned from that mistake with Rose. Because I agree with you that Rose could have a bounce back year. I think the new start will be good for him, but the fact of the matter was they were never going to pay him. It looks like he was. They were never going to re-sign another big long-term deal. So you proactive, you get something for him, like you said, and now they start to flip over the roster, like you did say. So now they have some young parts. They still have Butler around. They could keep him around. He should have a really big year. They could look to trade him at the deadline or something, even if they still want to look to trade him this offseason. So yeah, I think there's at least an outline of something. Like I said, I don't think they're going to be very good this year. My expectations are super low, but at least they're something kind of happening, I guess, with at least with some young players. So we'll see. So I guess we'll use that to transition into the draft. The Bulls almost traded Jimmy Butler on draft night. Supposedly, they did not. That's a whole other conversation. Maybe we could talk about that a bit later. But they ended up taking Denzel Valentine, number 14. You are Mr. Draft, Ricky O'Donnell. What's your take on Denzel Valentine at number 14?
I like that pick in the sense that I think that Valentine gives them a lot of the things they need. They needed a win.
Yeah.
And Valentine, I think he's got pretty good size. He's 6'5" with a 6'10" wingspan, so I don't worry about his size. They needed someone who could shoot. He was a great three-point shooter, both off the catch and off the bounce at Michigan State. You look at his numbers, he was taking 7.5 threes a game, knocking them down to 44%. That's extremely impressive. I mean, Buddy Hield got all the attention for being a shooter, but Valentine's numbers were just barely less impressive than Hield's. And Valentine brings so much more to the table in terms of his playmaking skills. 7.5 assists. He's a tough rebounder, 7.5 rebounds this past year. He had a 45.5 assist rate, which is just absolutely astronomical. Number 2 in the country last season. A lot of that was because Michigan State's point guard, Tum Tumnaren, went down in January, and they basically made Valentine the de facto point guard, surrounded him with shooters, let him pick apart defenses, and let him, bomb threes on his own accord as well. And it really worked out well for Michigan State, at least until they ran into Middle Tennessee. As long as the Bulls don't play Middle Tennessee, I think they're going to be okay. But I really like Valentine because I think he just adds quite a bit to the team in terms of what they needed from an offensive skill set standpoint. And I also don't think his defense is going to be that bad because I think he's going to be a smart team defender. He's long. So, Kyle Korver, you wouldn't think Kyle Korver is a good defender. Kyle Korver doesn't really have the tools to be a good defender, but he worked himself into being, average or slightly above average defender just because of his intelligence and his size. Valentine has those two things in spades. I know that we brought this up with McDermott to the Korver analogy, but to me, McDermott doesn't have a very high basketball IQ. I don't think he knows the game very well, even though he was a 4-year college player, even though his dad was a coach. And I think, his first 2 years in the NBA have exposed that a little bit. So while I do think that, McDermott and Valentine, not a great complement for each other because they both sort of have a little bit of similar strengths and weaknesses, Valentine is just a much more complete player. And I really like the fit of Valentine and Jimmy Butler. I think those two guys complement each other well. And 14th pick in a pretty rough draft. I think that the Bulls took a guy with a high floor and a relatively high ceiling who fits a team need, can play right away. It's tough to hate on that too much.
All right, yeah, I like the sound of it. Like I said, I'm somewhat familiar with this game. It sounds like he's really skilled. Like you said, good. The Bulls needed guys who can handle the ball, who can shoot and can pass. They just didn't have enough of that last year, and I think that's for one of the bunch of reasons why whatever Hoiberg or whatever didn't work. Obviously, a ton of stuff went wrong, but they needed more shooting. They needed another guy who can create stuff like that. So at least on that front, seems like a decent pick. Hopefully, like I said, hopefully his health holds up. I know there was all this hubbub about his knees not being great. We'll see about that, but I can dig it. Like I said, I can't be too upset about a number 14 pick on a guy that's that skilled and was that prolific in college. It's not like they gave up 5 draft picks and all those assets to move up to trade him like they did with Doug. So I can live with that. All right. Do you know anything about Paul, whatever, Zipser? I got nothing on him.
The thing I'll say about him is that he was at least projected in the top 30 of a lot of big boards and a lot of mock drafts leading up to the draft. So I do think he seems like he's got some game. I mean, I don't know. I can't speak about it with any confidence, but it doesn't seem like an Eric Murphy Cam Bear style situation
All
where
right.
they took a low maintenance white guy to fill that end of the bench role. Like Zipser might have some game. I don't know. So I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I would like to see Gary Payton too, because I think they still need a point guard. But they have Dinwiddie as a young point guard. They have Jerry as a young point guard. So I don't know.
Did you say you want them to sign him? Because I know didn't he signed with the Rockets?
I meant I wanted them to draft him.
Okay, all right, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Sounds fine. He's 6'8", he shoots it well. It seems like he can move a little bit, so who knows? I'll keep an open mind with that pick.
All right, cool. All right, so now that we've talked that, I guess now we should transition into the actual free agency, and the Bulls should have, I think when I've looked at it roughly, I think they should have around 24, 25 million. That's obviously assuming Pau and Noah are out the door, and at this point, I think that's a pretty safe assumption. Pau spent his 2 years here. They were a bit rocky, whatever. No, it's going to be tough to see Joakim Noah go, but it just seems like the relationship there is just not good anymore. And for what he'll command at his age and his price tag, it seems like, again, we got to flip over the roster, get younger, and they got Robin Lopez, so it sounds like Noah's gone. So they have a lot of roster spots kind of locked up right now. Like I said, they have about 24, 25 million in cap space. And they also have the Etuan Moore situation. We'll talk about that. I kind of wrote something today about Harry Barnes. I do not want any part of Harry Barnes, but just in general, his kind of player, there's going to be a lot of guys that are going to seem really overpaid this summer, just with the cap going up to 94 million. Harrison Barnes is an example of that. He might get a max deal, 23 million. I don't want the Bulls, with where they're at right now, I don't think that the Bulls should be focusing on these high max guys. Like the high max guys, doesn't seem like the Bulls have any chance. KD, Horford, Conley, those guys are all out. So if you're looking at the next tier of guys, I'd rather not max a guy like Harrison Barnes or somebody else like that, or pay way too much money for somebody like that in a season where the Bulls probably won't be that good and where it could hurt them down the line. I know the cap's going up again. So what I've wrote about this morning was just kind of they should look at doing something like Portland did last offseason, where you try to find value guys. And I know that'll be tough with this cap going up, but I think you can still find guys, youngish guys, maybe with a little more potential on a decent-sized contract. I don't know if you're looking at 12 million a year, something like that. Maybe you go up to 15 million. It's just a matter of finding those guys, and that could be somewhat tough. And I'd rather them do that than go out and use their entire cap space on one guy like Harrison Barnes. What is your take on the strategy the Bulls should use this offseason?
So I think that, the first thing you need to figure out about the Bulls is what do they need on the team? What is the team need? To me, their biggest need right now is athleticism and a versatile defender. This team is going to be really, really slow. If you look at the starting lineup, they don't even have a point guard right now. Whoever they're starting at the 3, whether it's Valentine, McDermott, or anyone else, is going to be slow. Mirotic at the 4, slow. Lopez at the 5. This is going to be one of the least athletic teams in the NBA. So to me, they need a dude who could come in, who could play, a 3-4 hybrid role for them, maybe 2-3 hybrid role as well. Someone who can defend his position, and someone who can just single-handedly boost the athleticism of the team by himself. Like, theoretically, if you put Hassan Whiteside on the Bulls, they would no longer look so unathletic, right? Just because you would have one guy who's such a freak athlete who could elevate everyone else. They're not going to get Hassan Whiteside, but I think that they need someone whose the strength of their game is their speed, just to try to elevate, what's looking like a really slow roster. And, we could go back and forth on a couple names. I know you've got some names you like, but the one guy I keep coming back to that I really like is Mo Harkless from the Blazers. Now, you could make the argument that maybe the Bulls should try to find the next Mo Harkless, because look what Mo Harkless got traded for last year. The Magic gave him up for a second-round pick that was protected through number 55 to Portland. Now we're looking at a guy who, I don't know, maybe he gets $11 million a year. His numbers weren't outstanding in Portland last year, even though he did start for them in the postseason. But he's still 23 years old. He's still 6'9", 220 pounds, super athletic. I think you could play him at the 3 or the 4. Ideally, you want to play him at the 3. Now, he doesn't shoot. He only shot it at 27% on under 2 attempts per game in the regular season. He did hit 34% on 4 attempts per game in Portland's short playoff run. So maybe that's encouraging. But I think that, you got your shooter with Valentine. So in a sense, if I'm looking for something in free agency, it's someone who's big and athletic, who can run the floor. And I think that Harkless would be pretty interesting. Now, Alan Crabb, his teammate in Portland, is another restricted free agent, just like Harkless is. And I think that's another guy who's kind of interesting. I sort of favor Harkless just because I'm thinking defense first in this. What do you think about that? And are there any other players who you would like to target?
Yeah, I think Harkless is a guy that makes sense. And because I just think, I go back to my Harrison Barnes thing. I feel like Harkless is a guy who will give you maybe not quite as much as Barnes, but basically a similar skill set, not as good of a shooter. But in terms of athleticism and defense, it's right there for maybe half the price. So I would much rather do that than spending twice as much on Harrison Barnes. I think Crabb's a good name. Kent Bazemore is another decent guy to look at. It sounds like, from what I'm seeing, though, it sounds like Bazemore is going to get a good amount of money. You could probably talk me into Bazemore at, I don't know, 15-ish million a year. I've seen some projections of him getting 17 to 18. That's starting to get a little high for me, considering I think he's probably reached his ceiling as a player. I think he's 27 or 28. And he's a nice player. I feel like he's the type of guy you would want to look at. He's young, he's solid athletic wing. He's not a great shooter. He's a bit streaky, but he's solid. So he's a decent option there, but he's maybe not great. Like I said, I would be very hesitant to overpay. And besides that, I agree with you. They need a wing. Do you think they should look at any other point guards? The point guard market is really weak this year. I mean, there's guys like Jeremy Lin, Brandon Jennings, Trey Burke is on the trade block. Maybe you try to trade for a guy like him for absolutely nothing. He should be worth, or you could probably get him in a trade for very little. I know.
I do Tony Snell for Trey Burke.
Yeah, him. I think we talked about earlier something like trying to get Ben McLemore in a trade. Just these youngish guys who have kind of struggled in their situation, and maybe a fresh start helps them out. If they don't, you aren't really giving up anything. I know some people. I think I saw this today. I think Sean Hyken, friend of the program, and Cody Westerland, they have a podcast together. I think I saw them suggest trying to trade for Patrick Beverly. I think that's a decent option. He's a good defender. He can shoot threes if he's spotting up. He's not really like a typical point guard, but when you have guys like Valentine, you have guys like Butler who can take a lot of those point guard duties that you don't necessarily need a guy who has to really run the offense. So I think looking into a trade for Patrick Beverly wouldn't be a bad idea, and he's on a pretty nice contract now. So I guess guys like that, just try to look for value through trades, look for value on the free agent market, and just like I said, I don't have great answers for this, just because it could be really hard to find that value with the cap going up so much. But I just don't like the idea of blowing all the cap space on one guy this offseason. I know the cap's going up again to 110 million, so it wouldn't be that horrible unless you just really blow it on a guy that just is totally mediocre. But I still would just rather be smart about it, because the Bulls aren't going to contend this year. So get some guys that can help now, and they can prove themselves in the future, and see where you go from there.
Yeah, I think they just need athleticism, man.
I agree. I totally agree with that.
So, to me, the point guard thing, the first thing you got to figure out is Jerry
Grant. Right, yeah.
One or a two or a combo, or what's he going to do? Okay, whatever. Then is Dinwiddie going to be on the team, or is he going to get cut? I would like to see them keep him, maybe because he had his best game of the year against the Bulls when he kind of outplayed D Rose.
He did.
I think that Dinwiddie has some potential, and I'm fine with him being the third string point guard in a sense this year. Now, I would like Etuan to be the point guard next season. And I think that last year we went through this where we saw that Etuan was better at the 2 than the 1. I definitely think that's the case, and that's why, a lot of people are saying right now, well, we don't want to pay Etuan more than $7 million a year next year. We want to keep it flexible. I would pay Etuan $10 million a year to be the point guard for a couple different reasons. First of all, look at Jimmy's career assist rates on Basketball Reference or anywhere else. He went from basically an 11% assist rate to a 14% assist rate to last year a 21.5% assist rate. So no one really saw Butler's development coming as a pick and roll ball handler, as a facilitator. He's really grown into that role, and he's very good at doing it. So I would be totally fine with having Etuan sort of serve the role as someone like George Hill. everyone loves George Hill, of course, because, what does he do? He spots up, he threes, he's long, he defends multiple positions. Well, Etuan hit like 44% of his threes last year, right? Etuan's long. He's got a 6'9" wingspan. Etuan was probably the Bulls' second best perimeter defender last season behind Butler. It's almost like people fetishize production to such a significant extent that they have a tough time like projecting future production, which obviously that's the whole name of the game. You always want to get future production, not past production, when you're going to make an investment in someone. Right. And I think that Etuan sort of fits like the rough facsimile of what George Hill is and what George Hill can be. So if you were thinking about taking Wade Baldwin with that 14th pick, someone who, even if he reaches his ceiling, could be a player like George Hill, maybe the 15th best point guard in the NBA, somewhere along those lines, I think that Etuan could give you, 80% of that for what will look like not a huge contract if they can get him for, let's say, 3 years, $30 million, 4 years, $40 million. And then if you get a young stud point guard, eventually a couple of years from now, next year, whatever it may be, he can also play the two. He's a versatile defender like that. He can play multiple positions. As long as the three-point shooting stays, like he's not the type of guard that's going to break you down off the dribble. That's going to hit you with the 1-2 crossover to create separation. And that's fine, though. Like those guys typically cost more money, and those guys also have warts in their game. What Etuan's going to be is a catch-and-shoot guy, a defensive guy, someone who can switch screens. And I am fine with that as the point guard next to Jimmy Butler. And I think, it's tough to put too much on Valentine's plate as a rookie, even though he is old. But ideally, if you have Valentine's playmaking ability, Butler's playmaking ability next to Etuan, that looks like a pretty solid 1-2-3 to me. If not this season, maybe next year, maybe the year after that going forward.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought Etuan up. I was gonna hope to transition to that. I think that makes perfect sense. Like I mentioned a guy like Patrick Beverley, and that's basically what you would be asking Etuan to do. Similar role, like I said, spot up shooting threes, play solid defense, do a little ball handling. But like you said, if they do keep Jimmy around, if they don't trade him, obviously if they trade him, they're rebuilding completely. But Jimmy has grown leaps and bounds as a playmaker. I know his numbers without Rose last year, when Jimmy was getting a lot of the usage, the Bulls ran a really effective offense with him running the show for a lot of the time. He put up great numbers. There's no reason to expect he won't do it again. Like it sounds like he's working really hard this offseason. He's got a lot to prove after this past season where he was really disappointing and he had a lot of people questioning him. So there's a lot of reason to expect Butler to take a lot of that on his plate, and he'll be fine. And Etuan's a guy you just really like to have around as a role player because, like you said, he's versatile. He can play at a couple different spots. So I would definitely agree. I wrote in my article this morning that I would tread lightly with using cap space to sign more because just for a little explainer, they have Moore's early bird rights, so they could sign him and go over the cap without using cap space for it's something like you said, $7 million a year. If he wants more than that, they have to use cap space to sign him. But thinking about it more, like Moore's the type of guy I'm talking about where you give him a $10 to $12 million contract and you feel pretty good about that in this new cap climate. And if there's other guys they don't feel are better and they want to use that on Moore, I'd be totally fine with that. Really solid player. He was really solid last year, so he'd be a nice guy to have around moving forward.
Yeah, my ideal free agency period for the Bulls right now, I think, is Moore and Harkless because the front court's set to me, right? They have a ton of guys. They have one too many guys in the front court as it is. They could stand to trade Taj if they want.
Right, yeah. So let's talk about that. Do you think they should trade Taj? I know we've talked about in the past. He's been such a solid trooper, such a solid player, and I think we've talked about like negotiating an extension for him, whatever. I feel like at this point, with what they have in the front court and they want to get younger, and in Taj's age and his injury history, I think it would be good to try to trade him for whether it's a draft pick, whether you try to get a young player out of him. They already have all these other guys. They got 4 other players there. I know there was always injuries, but I feel like at this point, I think they should try to trade Taj, open up a little more cap space if possible, get a younger asset. And it would be tough because Taj has been such a loyal guy, but I think at this point you're flipping over the roster as it is.
It would also be a stealth tanking move.
Yeah.
Because like without Taj Gibson, this team's gonna fucking suck. I mean, they're gonna be bad as it is, but chances are without Taj, they're gonna be much worse. And stealth tanking is the key. That's why
I'm all about it. Yeah.
That's why Sam Hinkie was an idiot. Sam Hinkie was way too much of a weirdo to like actually play the game, right? Meanwhile, the Lakers are out here signing Roy Hibbert and Carlos Boozer, beautiful. No one will accuse you of tanking when you're signing those guys. The Lakers knew those guys were terrible. They knew it. They knew they weren't going to get them back to the playoffs. They knew they would help them lose games, and that's essentially what they did. While Kobe distracted everyone with his shooting, now they have a really nice young core in place in Ingram and Russell. So, trading Taj to me would be a very stealth tanking move, and I think that's something that the Bulls have to think about in a sense. Also, what do you think of Felicio? So that's sort of to me, one of the big questions of this season. You're already laughing. I'm getting the sense that you don't think.
I do think he's fine. I know we've had this conversation before about just giving him a ton of minutes and the Felicio train. I think he should get at least 15, 20 minutes a game at least.
Yeah, I mean, Robin Lopez is going to play 20 to 30 minutes, and then give Felicio the rest of the minutes at center, and then at power forward, you got Mirotic and Portis. Portis can even slide up to the 5 sometimes if you need him to. And then, you just find whatever fifth big man.
And you're also, I would assume, with whatever Hoyball and all this crap, that they're going to play smaller lineups at some point as well. If you play small ball, you can play Jimmy at the 4. You could try Doug at the 4. I guess I'm not sure how much that works, but if they play smaller as well, if you have 4 big men, and then you want to play smaller as well, it's fine. And then you find another, and then if you sign a guy like Mo Harkless, that's another guy who can play the 4. You just don't need it.
Here's why we need the E'Twaun Moore Mo Harkless plan. It was because they have a stacked front court already. They're done in the front court, so don't even worry about front court guys. People are talking maybe Marvin Williams will be nice. It's he's going to get too much money. They don't need him, and he's not fast enough. You need Harkless and Moore because you need defense and just speed. They have no defense and no speed on the entire roster. There's only so many guys in this free agency class that fits. Do I have a lot of conviction in the thought that Mo Harkless is good? No, I don't know. But I know he's 6'9". I know he's fast as hell. I know he can defend multiple positions. And I know that, he can do little things like get buckets on cuts, get sort of garbage points that I think would just elevate the rest of the team. Now, my backup plan, is my boy Lance Stevenson. What do you think of the Bulls trying to go in on Lance? And do you think that a Lance-Rajon Rondo offseason pairing would be the best case scenario for the Bulls offseason?
I hate Rondo, so I would not want any part of Rondo. I know we were on.
Rondo is a hero. How can you hate Rondo?
I hate him for many reasons.
Threw Kirk Heinrich into the score table, and people hate him for that. That's ridiculous. People should love him for that.
I'm not going to go deep into Rondo because I can't imagine that happening. And maybe it does, and I'll hate myself, and I'll hate you. In terms of Lance, I know we were on the Lance train in 2014.
Lance train.
We were both on that, and that did not turn out very well at all.
Cracked and burned hard. It went off the rails.
Yeah, that went bad. I guess I just don't know signing Lance. He did kind of find his game again with Memphis last year. I just don't know where the future upside is in that. Because even if you do sign him to a 1 or 2 year deal, I feel like that's probably what he'll try to do is sign a 2-year deal with an option, and then maybe he cashes in next summer if he has a good season. Basically a prove-it contract. I guess just if he does have a nice season this year, are you really I guess you could always flip him for something. I just don't know. At this point, Lance just seems like such a volatile character. I'm just not sure if there's any long-term upside to signing him, because if he has a good year this year, then are you emboldened to give him a long-term contract next year? And
2 years, $20 million.
How long or what?
2 years, $20 million.
If you can lock him in for 2 years for cheap like that, maybe, like I said, if he's looking for something where he wants to cash in next offseason,
$5 million maybe. And because I think you could play him with the starters, you could play him on the bench and let him get a little more freedom with his creativity. Let's say you try to get him to play defense again. My issue is that Hoiberg is, what word can I use on this podcast?
Pushover?
A pushover. Hoiberg is a pushover. And I think that that's something that they're going to have to address one way or another. Hoiberg, dude, you're the coach. You can't let the inmates run the asylum, for lack of a better analogy. So would Lance run all over Hoiberg? Yes. Would it be hilarious? Of course. Would it be functional? So I do think Lance has some good years left. Look at his numbers on the Grizzlies this last season. I'm going to Google this and read them off to this podcast aloud because I feel like people sleep on the fact that once Lance left the Clippers and got to Memphis, he was pretty damn good. His numbers were in – page is loading. Hang on. Okay, yeah, so in 26 games for the Grizzlies, Lance played 26 minutes a game. He averaged 14.2 points, 4.4 rebounds, 2.8 assists on 47% shooting from the field and 35.5% shooting from three on 1.2 attempts per game. So we know the jump shot is Lance's biggest concern outside of, I guess, his character, which is a big concern as well. But the Bulls need defense, dude. If you can reinvent Born Ready, if Born Ready could be born again as a lockdown defender, this dude went toe-to-toe with LeBron in the playoffs as a 23-year-old. Like, he's pretty athletic. He's pretty young. I think that, they need defense. They need athleticism. I'm fine with having a crazy person. Give me Lance. Give me Rondo. Give me Mo Harkless.
I would feel better about Lance if they did have a better coach, I guess, Tibbs could rein him in. I don't know. Lance with Fred just seems like a mess. And I think at this point, I think I learned after pushing for Lance in 2014, I don't know if I can endorse making that push again because I just
double down.
I don't know. I don't know if I could do that. But yeah.
Is there any other free agents you like? I'd love to hear some names of free agents.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking. Like I said, I'm looking at the list right now. Actually, so like obviously, like I said, all the max guys or most of the top max guys out of the question, either because they don't want to come to the Bulls, or there was one thing that friend of the program, Hungarian Jordan, said. Apparently, he tweeted or he put in the comments of Bloggable about how Whiteside is leaning away from teams without stable organizations. That's Hassan Whiteside. So you look at that, and I think a lot of those top guys, like they see the Bulls as kind of a mess, so they just don't have any interest in them right now. So that's, in general, you're going down towards some of the lesser guys. Like, I mean, other top guys like Chandler Parsons, no, he's gonna cost some max. He's got knee problems. No thanks. Batum's not coming. Ryan Anderson, no, they don't need him in the front court. Like Luol Deng would be like a decent option, but that ship has sailed. Like you're not gonna do that. Like at his price, he'd probably be all right. I think somebody asked us about Jordan Clarkson. The Lakers are gonna keep him. He's restricted. He's gonna cost a lot. If you're looking, I mean, what do you think of like Evan Turner? Like,
I would probably stay away from Evan Turner because he's slow. Like they fast.
Right.
All right, let's play a little game here. I'm gonna throw some names out at you.
Yeah, I'm going right down the list here, and
you're gonna give me a quick take on whether or not you think this player would fit for the Bulls. Sean Livingston.
I think the Warriors are guaranteeing his contract. I think he's staying unless they wanted to trade for him. But that's again.
I thought he was a restricted free agent.
Livingston, no. I think he had a non-guaranteed contract or something like that.
All right, my bad. Ian Clark. There's a restricted free agent. Golden State wing from Belgium.
Right. He'd be down on my list, but if you get to a point where you could sign him for cheap, take a chance, sure. I mean, like I said, athletic, shoot a bit. From what I watched a lot of the Warriors this year, he would take some crazy ass shots when he was in, but obviously this is like bottom of the barrel stuff. But that's the kind of stuff where he does a little better in a bigger role. So that's not somewhere, obviously, like I said, lower on the totem pole, but not completely terrible if you get him for a really cheap price. Tyler
Johnson.
I think that'd be a really nice option. It sounds like he might get a decent chunk of change. Like he'll get probably 8 figures, but that's another type of guy that he'd be a decent option.
Luke Richard Bahumate. I can never pronounce Luke Richard.
I think it's Mbamute, I think.
Mbamute.
Probably. I think I don't know how old he is at this point. I'd probably pass on him. I guess he would fit into that 3-4 mold that kind of like Harkless would fill, but that's an to me. I'd rather look for the younger guys.
Langston Galloway.
He's all right.
I like Langston Galloway.
Yeah, he's not bad. I think when he first came up, he was pretty good. And I think he kind of took a step back last season. That's another guy where if you get a chance to sign him for whatever, sure, why not?
All right, now you can throw some names at me because that's all I had.
I'm just looking at some. I'm going right down this free agent list. Like Yambo would have been a great choice, but he's gonna get overpaid, so he's probably out. Ezeli was absolute garbage in the playoffs, and like we talked about front court, we really don't need centers with Rolo there. But just I would like a guy like Biombo is young enough where I would sign him for the right price, but he's too much. Like I said, Ezeli's bad. Evan Fournier is definitely staying in Orlando now that they traded Oladipo. You already mentioned Marvin Williams. No. J.R. Smith. No. Jamal Crawford is old. Jeff Green. No. Jeff Green.
Jeff Green.
Would you sign Jeff Green for if you could get him for cheap?
How fast is he?
I always thought he was pretty somewhat athletic, but he's like the poor man's Harry Barnes.
Dude, I'm legitimately Harkless or bust, I think. All these guys suck. And Tyler Johnson's good, but he's too short. And he's not going to defend like wings.
Yeah, I mean Courtney Lee.
Courtney Lee's good, but like he should go to a good team, not a trap.
Right. Like Bulls. Jared Dudley, not athletic, not fast. Like I think he would just kind of be. I feel like Dudley would almost be too redundant with a guy like Valentine, probably, right? Or Doug. Dudley's a really nice player to have around, but I don't think
he's great.
Yeah.
But not for the Bulls.
Right.
Dudley should go to like OKC.
Yeah, that would be really fun.
Yeah.
I'm just going right down this list. There's Lance at number 46. I'm looking at Hoops Hype.
Man, Ziller's got Lance at 108 out of 117, and his comment is just no. Here's one. How about Gerald Green, an unrepented gunner?
Oh man. I guess that wouldn't be terrible. He'd be cheap. He was at the minimum last year.
So Gerald Green is not young. I know this because we graduated in high school the same year. Shout out to the class of 2005.
Yeah.
But like to me, Gerald Green could be pretty useful if you could get him to play defense. Now, can you teach a 29-year-old how to play defense? I know I've personally never played defense, so it would be tough for me to say that you could teach Gerald Green to play defense. But if he could play even a little defense, maybe that would be a decent buy low option.
Yeah, sure. Like I said, it's athleticism, speed. There you go. Besides that, a lot of these other names we've kind of gone over already. And Gerald Henderson, maybe. He's not terrible. He's not exactly young, but
yeah.
Austin Rivers. And it's like vomit-inducing almost. But like I said, he'd come somewhat cheap. So I mean, I'm looking at just cheaper guys that you take a chance on.
Harkless.
Yeah, I mean Harkless is a decent name. So I don't know.
He's fast. He can defend multiple positions. He would immediately boost the level of athleticism on the team. I would start him at the 3 next to Butler next year. I would go Moore, Butler, Harkless, Mirotic, Lopez. So then Lopez and Harkless would give you no shooting. Jimmy is an so-so shooter. You hope that Jimmy can shoot like he did a season ago and not this past season. Because I think he was like 35% and then he dipped down to like 31%. Yeah. I'm just going off memory here, so I'm not sure if those numbers are super accurate. But Mirotic should be a plus shooter.
Yeah, Mirotic was low key, like really, really good after he came back from that thing. He was still kind of streaky, but he had some really great games. And if you could find a little more consistency, I thought last year was going to be a breakout year for Nico. Maybe this year will be more, since hopefully maybe he'll take on a little bigger role now that Rose is gone and Pow's gone. Some of the usage can transfer over from them to Nico, and maybe they'll do what he needs to sub up big. A couple other names.
Great. I'm glad you brought that up because this is the last thing I wanted to yell about. Okay. And then you can yell about whatever too. But
all right.
Last year, why did the Bulls suck? I think that part of the reason they sucked was because they did not have defined roles on the teams and no one bought in to what the system was or what their roles were, right? Who was the number one option on the team last year? I think Powell would say it was Powell. I think Jimmy would say it was Jimmy. And I think Derek would say it was Derek. That can't happen. You can't have a setup where some days Mirotic is the number 2 option when he's hitting shots, and then when he's not hitting shots, he's like the number 7 option. He's playing 10 minutes a game. So to me, the thing they need to do is figure out the roles, and I think that they have done that this year by getting rid of Derek and getting rid of Powell. So Jimmy's the clear-cut number 1 option now, right?
Yes.
The number 2 option finally is Mirotic, and I think that he needs to be empowered, and you need to ride and die with him because you know what? If he's great, awesome. You have a young stud stretch forward who totally fits in with the way the league's going, and if he sucks, that's fine too because then you're tanking and losing and getting a better draft pick. So I roll with Mirotic 100% of the way this season. And then also you have Portis behind him who can play the 4 or the 5, and you can figure out what you're doing with him. But to me, this is the make or break season for Mirotic. He's the most important player on this team. He's the one guy who's going to determine how close the Bulls actually are to contention. Because after Mirotic came back from the appendectomy last year, he was so prolific scoring in bursts that I do still think he could potentially be a fringe all-star type of player. Maybe that sounds crazy. I know a lot of people who read bloggable.com think Nikola Mirotic is trash. Maybe trash. Who am I to say? But I think that if you can do it once, you're at least capable of doing it all the time, right? We know that he is capable of having good games, so that means he is capable of being a good player. He needs to get back to hitting threes. He needs to get back to drawing fouls. If he can do that, I think he's a legit number 2 option. And I think that just the roles being more streamlined this season will help the Bulls so much more, especially when they have a coach like Hoiberg who won't tell anyone to do anything. He's like letting people kind of like think it out themselves. Well, all right, that's not going to work when you have a bunch of guys who think they're better than they actually are.
Right.
Jimmy, number 1 option.
Yeah.
You go number 2 option. Who's your number 3 option? Exactly. So like
Doug.
more hitting the catch and shoot threes. Maybe McDermott takes a step up in his 3rd year. And I'm not writing off McDermott. I've seen a lot of McDermott hate always. And I don't think McDermott's a great player. And I think the trade to get him will always look terrible. And I don't think he's ever going to be able to justify that trade. But the trade is gone, dude. The trade's over. You're not getting those picks back. The trade is way in the rear view mirror at this point. I just want Doug to get to a point where he can help the team. And I do think last year, with the way he was able to improve shooting the ball from 3, with the way he was able to develop a floater, and with these dunks, where did these dunks come from? Is Doug McDermott the best dunker? Where did these dunks come from? I think he can still be a pretty good player. A useful, helpful player. Not a starter, probably, but just a guy who you would rather have on the team than not have on the team. And that's where my expectations are for Doug McDermott at this point.
Okay, yeah. So I was going to say, somebody asked that question. I think it was actually VJ asked me, our fellow bloggable writer, about if you would just trade McDermott for – I wouldn't like dump McDermott for nothing. Was I agree with you? I'm not a fan of McDermott at all. I didn't like the trade. I don't know if his defense will ever be up to snuff. He doesn't really do anything.
Help the team, or are you writing him off?
I feel like in the right role, he can help the team with his shooting and his offense. They just have to find that, because right now his defense is so bad and he doesn't really do anything else, and that it just doesn't help the team enough. In the right role, perhaps he does. So with Doug, I wouldn't look to trade him for like nothing. If a right deal came up where you can get a future asset, another player that maybe fits in better, sure, why not?
All right, and before we get to some closing thoughts here, I'm just going to read the stats of a certain player out loud, and you can tell me if you think this player would help the team conceivably. 11.5 assists a game, 45% shooting from the floor, 36.5% shooting from 3 on 2.5 attempts per game.
I know this is Rondo.
12 points.
I know it's Rondo.
Rajon Rondo, point guard of the future.
You're the worst.
To have Rondo and Lance run all over Hoiberg, the Bulls will suck.
Maybe that gets Gar Forman fired. If that's your
fired, and then they can draft Markelle Fultz from Washington, number 1 pick in the 2017 draft. They have their point guard of the future. Stealth tanking. It worked for the Lakers. It can work for us.
I'll pass on that. But if it got Gar fired, maybe it'd be all right. All right, so let's wrap it up here. Actually, to wrap it up, let's talk about Jimmy Butler. Since the Bulls did supposedly almost trade him, he is their best player, and the Bulls are kind of in a weird spot with Jimmy because, like I said, he is their best player by a lot, But right now, with the team kind of going through this rebuilding phase, some people think that there's no point in keeping him around and like locking yourself into mediocrity with him. They should rebuild, trade Jimmy for whatever, and just start completely over. I hated basically all those offers that the Wolves and Celtics put on the table that were reported. LaVine at number 5, not enough. The Celtics stuff like Crowder number 3 and 16, that's not enough. Would you want to revisit trading Butler either this summer or at the deadline? Or what are your feelings about trading? I know.
So these offers for Butler were terrible. I will trade Jimmy Butler. Sure, you better pay up. And what I'm looking for in a Jimmy Butler trade is a decent young player, a high current draft pick, and a good future draft pick. If you can do that, then okay, maybe we can start talking. If the Celtics want to trade Jay Crowder, the number 3 pick, theoretically this past year, and the Nets pick in 2018 or whatever, 17, they can, switch picks.
Swap, yeah.
Then maybe then sure, maybe. Throw in Memphis' pick too in 2019 while you're at it. Like, so pay up to get Jimmy Butler. We're not trading Jimmy Butler for 80 cents on a dollar. 120 cents on, or $1.20, 120 on a dollar, then yeah. And I don't think that having Jimmy Butler on the team is essentially locking the team into mediocrity. First of all, Paul George was the 10th pick in the draft. Kawhi Leonard was the 15th pick in the draft. So don't give me this garbage that you need a high pick. You could get a high pick and end up with goddamn Jamal Murray. You know what I mean? Like, you don't know. You just don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, like, in that sense, there's also a pretty big free agent class looming next year. Now, will the Bulls do anything in that free agency class? Of course not. We shouldn't even get everyone's hopes up. They're not going to sign Russell Westbrook. They're not going to sign Blake Griffin. They're not going to sign Steph Curry. They're going to blow it, of course. But theoretically, it is easier to attract a top talent when you have someone like Jimmy Butler on the team. Also, Jimmy Butler's trade value is not going to decrease by him staying on the Bulls for this season.
He's put up huge numbers this year.
If anything, it could go up. Right,
yeah.
Exactly. So, like, this idea that they need to trade Butler to tank for the 2017 draft, I totally disagree with that. Hang on to Butler. Get rid of everyone else. You can still be bad enough to get a high enough draft pick to find a good player. And then when you want to actually start to try to contend again, Butler is A, still young enough to compete, to be good. B, still under contract. C, under a good enough contract where you can fit in a co-star next to him. And what letter am I on now? D?
Yeah, I think so.
He's talented enough that other players will want to come play with him, especially now that he's got this USA basketball experience. I would hang on to Butler unless you actually give a good offer. And the Celtics throwing out these trash offers. It's like, Danny Ainge, who do you think you are? We're not trading Jimmy Butler for Avery Bradley in the 3rd pick in a 2-player draft. Get out of here. You need to come with big-time future assets if we're going to do it.
Yeah, I agree. I got in a whole war with Celtics fans.
You got me all worked up.
I got in a whole war with Celtics fans over the weekend arguing about the trade offer. That I said that number 3, which what would have been Chris Dunn probably for the Bulls on draft night. It would be Jaylen Brown now if they revisited it. Number 3, and the 16 pick is, whatever. That's nothing to me in a Jimmy Butler trade. And then, what was it? I think Jay Crowder. Like, Jay Crowder's a really good player. And I had all these Celtics fans coming at me about how Jay Crowder's like borderline star, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, not really. Like, Jimmy Butler's far better. So, like, I put out basically the offer that you said. It's one of their young guys, and whether that's Marcus Smart, Avery Bradley, Jay Crowder, one of those guys. And those guys aren't even as important to me as then whatever. It would be Jaylen Brown now, like I said, and then the Nets pick swap. And, like, they all argue, well, like, that could be top pick in that draft. It's like, well, you are getting Jimmy Butler, who is a guaranteed star player on a great contract for years. Like, if you want to keep kicking the can down the road, you can hang on to all these assets. Like, at some point, your assets need to turn into something. So, like, I kept just arguing, like, Jimmy is worth that much, and a lot of them come with he didn't lead the Bulls to the playoffs in a week. He's like, whatever. Like, we know how much Jimmy is.
I'm a Celtics fan. I would have given up Crowder, the number 3 pick, and a future pick.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's totally fair.
They're offering Avery Bradley 3 and 16. It's like, I'm not even talking Danny Ainge ever again because he's not trustworthy. He has betrayed my trust by offering these super crappy trades.
Yeah, because basically what it comes down to is the Celtics are getting a legitimate top 15. When you say Butler's a top 15 player, you're getting a guaranteed top 15 guy in his prime, and then they're trading. They still have a ton of great assets. They're trading basically either like a rookie and then a solid role player and then a chance at somebody really good. It's basically all chances and a solid role player. And you're getting a star player that could help you recruit other star players, whether it's Horford, whether it's KD this summer, whether it's moving forward. And they still have a ton of other nice players and assets too, which is why I was befuddled why they wouldn't. I mean, but obviously they're so used to Danny Ainge probably ripping people off that they think that they could rip off the Bulls for Jimmy Butler.
Well, people talk about like Lakers exceptionalism quite a bit. Like the Boston fans have this same complex to me. Like, yo, you don't get every good player because you're the Boston Celtics. I would rather have Jimmy Butler stay on the Bulls forever and be miserable and sulk and trade him to the fucking Boston Celtics. You know what I mean? Not Jimmy Butler. You don't deserve to get him because you're Boston. I'm not giving him to you because you're Boston.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I don't know if I'd go that far. Like I said, I would make that trade if they. It's all about that Nets pick. But
if they want to give the future Nets pick and the future Grizzlies pick, all right, that's fine.
I'm with you.
Trade.
Well, I'm glad we're on the same page about Jimmy. Like I said, there's no rush to trade him. They can do it whenever they want. His value should either, unless there's a terrible injury, which there's always that risk, but you take that chance. I'll roll with Jimmy and then possibly looking to trade him in the future. And
all right, so here's how we're doing the end of this. Jason, are you still there? Jason, are you still there?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, the video cut out for a second. We're going to do 2 minutes of closing.
Okay.
So you get to go first.
Just are we just looking at this in general? Just basically general thoughts on free agency? All right. So like I said, heading to this offseason, my expectations are very low. I basically just don't want the Bulls to overpay for mediocre players. So like I wrote this morning, no Harrison Barnes. As we've talked about this entire time, try to look for those value contracts. I think you should look at re-signing Etuan Moore. He's the type of guy you have around. And you try to get some of these younger guys. You try to get younger and athletic, but in the right way. Try to get value contracts, which could be difficult with the cap spike, but add a couple guys if you can. Look to trade Taj Gibson. Look to trade Dunleavy. Look to trade Snell. Do whatever with Calderon. And just kind of go into next season with a youngish roster, with or without Jimmy Butler, preferably with, unless you get a great trade offer, and you just kind of see where it rolls. So maybe Hoiberg can mold this team into a team that plays the style that he wants. Maybe they're surprisingly good like the Blazers. If they're not, you get in the lottery next year. Maybe you get lucky. Next year's draft should be pretty good. And then you'll have a ton of flexibility in 2017 when there is a big free agency class. Like you said, they will not get the top guys, but if you have a chance at adding some really good players in 2017 with that flexibility and you have a decent young core that you build in 2016, I'm good with that. So like I said, I'm at peace with my lowish expectations for the Bulls, not only this summer, but next year. But they can still build something while doing this. You just have to do it smart.
Okay. So you left 28 seconds on the clock, but that's all right. So I think my thing is that this is going to be considered a hot take to some of the Bulls fans out there, but I think the Bulls should try to get better in free agency.
Oh, yeah, I agree. They should get better, but I don't think they should try so hard where it's
right.
They're like they just overpay for guys.
I'm on the same page. So, but to me, like if you have to overpay a little bit, as long as those guys make the team actually better,
I would be fine in
certain instances.
Yeah,
I'm giving Etuan Moore $10 million a year. I'm going to have him be the starting point guard. That's the first thing I'm doing.
That's fine. Honestly, I'd be fine with that.
Next to Jimmy Butler. I would like to start Denzel Valentine as the 3, but even as an old rookie, I don't know if he's going to be able to handle that because it's just a big adjustment from the college game to the NBA game, no matter how good you are. So instead of the 3, I'm signing Mo Harkless. I don't care how much it costs. If the Bulls need to trade Gibson, if they need to trade
I think Dunleavy, that's an absolute guy that should look to move.
To open it up, I'm doing that. I would give him as much as 12 or 13 million a year, ideally 4 years, 44 million for Mo Harkless. If I got to go up to 48 million, if I got to go up to 50 million, you're twisting my arm, I'm going to do it. Because this team has no one on the entire team who can run fast or play defense. Mo Harkless would kill 2 birds with 1 stone there. You can put him at different positions in different lineups, at the 3, at the 4. You can have him switch pick and rolls. You can have him guard whoever. He would actually give them a decent transition player. They don't have anyone who could score on a fast break right now. Just signing that one guy alone would boost the rest of the team's total athleticism a little bit. And if they can't get Harkless, because the Blazers have a ton of cap space, if they're going to match Crabbe, Harkless, and Leonard, I would sign Lance. I know people don't like to hear it, but I think Lance on a buy low contract, if you can get him 2 years, $25 million maybe, I would probably do that because they need another wing. They need someone who could play defense, and they need someone whose best years could potentially still be in front of them. I think Lance fills all of those things. And if all that fails, I would sign Rondo because it would be fun. It would be fun.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. So that all you got? Is that what we got? We ready for some Bulls free agency tomorrow night?
Do it, man.
Probably nothing will happen.
8 wins, here we come.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, exactly. The ride to mediocrity begins. Like I said, I hope they get in the lot. I'm honestly fine with the lottery next year. If they surprise and get in the playoffs, I think it'll be because some of the young guys are fun and play well. I think so. I think honestly, I'm fine with where the Bulls are at. Hopefully, they can add to the team in smart ways this offseason. And like I said, maybe they'll surprise us next year and actually be a fun team to root for. Because the last couple of years, the team just was not fun to root for. There was just so much crap going on, so much drama, and so much of us. It would just be fun to have some young guys to root for again, kind of like the baby Bulls back in the day. You have a star in Butler, and maybe it comes together nicely, and they're actually enjoyable to watch. We'll see. I don't know.
All right, so thanks for listening to anyone who actually listened to this, and we're Mo Harkless or bust this offseason, and if not Harkless, Lance. Mark it down. Yeah, boom. All right, so yeah, check out. Just be sure to keep coming to Bloggable. We'll have all your offseason coverage with free agency starting tomorrow night, and like I said, we'll see what happens. Only God knows, in the words of D. Rose, R.I.P. Derrick Rose's Bulls career. All right, later. Later.